Alright, this is a quick video of how I'm changing the or upgrading the trunnions on my G8 6.0 LS engine. The L76 has the DoD feature for the valves or the lifters that will hydraulically controlled so that it can close off 4 cylinders. I'm going to be doing the delete on that as well at the same time I'm doing this trunnion upgrade. One thing about these LS3 style L76 heads is you'll notice these rockers, you have a curved one and a straight one, and then a curved one and a straight one. So make sure you don't get those off and mixed up, because that will ruin your day. You'll probably notice it whenever you go to put it back on, and it won't. The push rod won't set on the rocker right. So actually, I guess the push rod would. It'd be the follower end maybe that wouldn't do right. But either way, it's best to keep them lined out. So this one I've already done. You can see there, this is the kit from ZZPerformance. It's very similar to some of the others you'll see that have the captive clip ring on the ends that holds the bearings so that they can't, it retains them in, so there's no way to lose the needles out of it. And that's the risk with these. With these are better than brass, because you can run these things at 7,000 RPM with no problem, and you won't have the eventual wear that you would with the brass ones. So I want to walk through what I'm going to do real quick. So I take them off one at a time. I push the bolt out. I actually do a little cleanup on them. I'll spray them off, and then I've got a Harbor Freight arbor press over here. So what I'll do is I'll take that and position it right over that washer. These washers came with the kit. Actually, I don't do it. Sorry, not starting out. I'll put this device on there first, because that the washer won't allow those original stock ones to fall through. So this does. This is a little piece I've got there that'll allow that to fall through. Then I'm going to take it, run my arbor press up. I'm going to run my arbor press up, and I've got a 9/16 with the step down neck on it. It's Pittsburgh. That way if I break it, I ain't too worried about it. And that just happens to be just the right size to put in here and push that top bearing through, and it'll also push the bottom one out with it when it goes. So that right there is the stack up. I'm going to try to shoot this video with one hand while I press down with the other to show pressing that bearing through. See if I can get an angle where you can see it though. Yeah. I always like to back up once I get it started, just to make sure I've got everything lined up so that it push through. And there it goes. So there's it knocked out, and I'll show you assembling it here in a second. First thing I want to show is these bearings. So try to get a close up there. you go. So you can see there's a plastic keeper holding those needle bearings in there, and on one side of the bearing there's some writing. See that there? That's where the bearing part number is. I've read different places, and apparently ZZPerformance doesn't believe there's a difference in how they go in, because these little plastic sleeves are randomly put on. So there's not a rhyme and reason to how you would slide them on the shaft, where if they expected you to go in one way, you think they'd line those up. More people than not say to put the part number, the writing, on the outside. Put it in so that the writing is on the outside of the rocker arm. So that's what I do. Again, I've looked at them real close. I think the shoulder on both sides is exactly the same on these bearings, so I don't think it would matter. But one thing I do know is there's on the rockers, on the shafts for these that they give you, it does have a little bit of cosmoline or something on that to prevent that from corroding and rusting. So I use some electrical cleaner, or I've got brake clean too. I've used both to clean that off and wipe it off first. Then I'll take and lube each end with the ultra slick engine assembly. You can use whatever brand you prefer. I'm sure it works just about as good. But I'll lube both of those up. Then I'm going to take it, and once I have this positioned right, which in this case this is, and I have this lubed, I'm going to set it on top of that, and then I'll just pick that bearing up, and that plastic sleeve will slide out from under it, and I'll make sure I don't lose any of the needle bearings that way. They typically will stay in place, but hey, I have dropped one already and lost one of the needles, so that bearing was shot, so I had to order some replacements. So I bought a few extra in case that happens again. But anyway, after that I started doing it this way just to be sure. So after I get the shaft cleaned, lubed, and ready to press the next one back on, I'll start the video again. So there's the stack up. Show you real quick. Carefully lift that off. So I've got that bearing slid through there. You can see it's on there, and I've got the lube on it. Putting it through on the assembly washer. Then I'm setting the rocker centered on top of that. And then it's hard to do this with one hand. So I'll probably go ahead and stop the video here in a second and get this all lined up. Anyway, I'm going to put that on top. And then I've got a large socket. It's probably like a 22 or something, 24 millimeter socket that I just use to press so that can push through, just same size as that, basically same size as that washer. So I'll get all that set up and try to start the video before I press it on. Okay, so I've got it on there. I've got just a little bit of pressure just so it doesn't move on me while I get ready to pull down on it. And let's just see that. So again, I'm going to stop and let that reseat. And basically what you want is that washer to be completely flat. I've actually got just a little bit of gap there, so I'm going to back it up. Make sure everything's lined up good. Give it just a little more. We're flat now. You want that bearing to be right up next to that. There should still be just a fraction of play side to side on that once we get everything put together, and I'll show you. But let me put the top bearing on then, so I'll pull this off. We'll set the top bearing on there, and then we'll go at it again. Alright, so there's the top bearing. The writing is on the top where that plastic is. And you can see what I'm talking about. It just pushes the plastic right off there and retains the needles on there. So I'll set my washer back on there. And I'll put my socket in. I'm trying to do this one-handed. Sorry about that. And give that a little bit of a shove. Get it started. Now I can make sure it's lined up better. There we go. See, that should have it compressed. Yep, that's down flush. So now we're ready to put the keepers in, and I'll show you what I do with that. So one thing that I do, I've already got the heavy duty assembly lube on there, so it's the thick, you know, extra thick assembly lube, so that you don't have any dry start. But I also like to go ahead, and I've got some thinner oil here, just it's actually a 3-in-1 oil, and I'll just get a little bit on that, so that this well, so some of it will get down in there too with the bearing, and it'll let that initial spinning of that bearing be a little bit freer, and then also give it a little bit of a lube between the snap ring and the groove there. So I'm not going to try to do the snap ring one-handed and film. I know I'll mess up if I do, but I'll just show you basically what I'm going to do. You would put the snap ring on and just pull it together and snap it on there like normal. You almost always have to give it a little bit extra shove after you take your plier off to get it to snap into the groove, because this should spin freely. Once that's in the groove, you should be able to spin it freely. If it's tight and it's not moving, you can't spin it freely, then you haven't got it seated in the groove good. That's pretty much it. Just to show you what I was talking about, see that snap ring should spin in that groove. Both of them do. And to give you an idea on what kind of play, see if I can get this to where I can do it with one hand. Well, yeah, see if I can. If you can see that moving there, it's got just a little bit of play side to side like that. That's all you need.